to be able to go back and see what state of mind I was in a while ago. But if you don't create your own material, if you don't express yourself, and this is also a good way to show your authenticity, show who you are by expressing yourself through these videos or some kind of, whether it's artwork or something that expresses your own beliefs and thoughts. And so this will help you practice for that. But now you can see how you've been controlled for so long. They implant seeds, for example, however they're doing it, and more than likely what they're doing is they're getting on YouTube, and they've probably got tons of people monitoring our mass consciousness to see which way it's going based on the seeds that they plant. For example, when Leonid Elenin, for example, discovered the comet, even though Richard Hoagland and his team have verified that this thing is hardly big at all, right? And you can actually discount the dwarf star part of this, because if it was a dwarf star, then you wouldn't be able to go out there with a telescope, plug in the coordinates, and it come up with the same planets, or they would be off by quite a lot. For example, go out, if you have one of those telescopes, go plug it in outside, type in the coordinates for Jupiter, and see if Jupiter looks like it's right in the center. If it's not, and it's way off, or it's not on the telescope, well, maybe we've got a dwarf star. But if it's sitting right in the middle, you can rule that out, because a dwarf star would actually cause gravity disturbances, right? So that takes us back to Elenin. What is Elenin? Well, right now what they've done is they've planted a seed in people. And when Leonid Elenin discovered this thing, it was not too long after that there was this huge consciousness on the internet about how it was, the dwarf star and all this. And what they did was they paid attention to where our mass consciousness was going, where people were being affected the most, and they planted more seeds, and they guided you the whole way there, because you had no thoughts for your own. The only thing that you did was take in that information as a passive type of person. So basically, if you can change that part of yourself, you won't be as vulnerable. And I highly suggest that you create your own videos in order to practice using that part of your active brain. So you can form these thoughts. Go out there, study as much as you want to. But one of the things that I do is, after I do all that studying and everything, when I go out there, it really helps me to be able to spit it all back out to you, because regardless of what you're getting out of it too, I'm also getting benefit out of it, because when I spit it all out back to you, I'm actually confirming it in my own head, right? I'm actually willing those thoughts into my belief system, which empowers me and raises my consciousness. And then when I see people that benefit from it, it even confirms stuff even more, right? So anyways, I want to jump to the next topic here real quick. And what I would ask you guys to do is, I would ask you guys to make sure that, if you can, to copy this and upload it and spread it wherever possible. I think this is really important, and I think this is something that I discovered that is significant, based off of what I heard Richard Hoagland talk about, and then also confirming on several sites. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you a little bit of one of my favorite YouTube people again, which is Jordan, the spirit science guy. I want to play a little bit of that same video that I played you last time. And we're going to key in on a couple of things I didn't notice the last time. And I just put them together. And I'm going to show you something that I believe, after you see it, you should be able to use one of these things that I just showed you in order to make it rock solid, that you don't have anything to worry about. So, okay, we're going to take a look at a little bit of history again, and I want you to key in on what has happened before, and then we're going to try to relate that to possibly some things that have been happening maybe 10 years ago, and what could be happening again. So,
Thousands of clay tablets were pulled out of a lost city, thousands of years old. They described a new version of our history that is putting the pieces back into place. The continent of Atlantis was a thriving home for the human race, but we had visitors, one of which changed our evolutionary path forever.
Alright, now I'm going to skip above here just a little bit. Okay, play a little bit more right here.
Before we continue, we have to talk about polar shifts. See, in the 1930s, Edgar Cayce was channeling information for a geologist when he stopped and he said, "There's something you should know. In the near future, the Earth's poles are going to shift." Cayce was a brilliant man with a very strong connection to higher dimensions, where he communicated with other beings for the human race. Ultimately, it was because of his channelings that the belief system called New Age was created. This is again just putting what he was doing into boxes of understanding, because no one else understood what he was doing at that time.
Okay, so all of you folks that love to speak New Age all the time, so now you know where it comes from, okay? And so basically it was somebody who was using something that is basically dates back to ancient Egypt. It's just that nobody knew where to place it at that time because we had lost that knowledge because we weren't allowed to use it anymore, okay?
Nevertheless, when Cayce talked, people listened. Geologists began exploring the possibility of a polar shift, and they found something remarkable. A string of major pieces of evidence came forth and lent tremendous weight to what Cayce...
Okay, I'm going to skip it just a little bit ahead here. Okay, so on this polar shift, I want you to pay attention to the amount of time or the interval between polar shifts.
Again, and within 24 hours, the sun would be rising differently than it did the previous day. This shift has happened hundreds of times over the last 100 million years on Earth, but it's speeding up now and happening faster and faster. Now only 13,000 years between each shift.
Okay, did you catch that? 13,000 years between each shift. Okay, now I want to take you to something different. Okay, I'm just going to take you to a blog rather than trying to find it, but inside Richard Hoagland's interview on Red Eyes Creations. But here's the story, okay? When Leonid Elenin calculated Elenin, okay, he calculated it and said that the object is an elliptical orbit of, guess what, 13,000 years, okay? However, check this out. NASA has been in disagreement with him and has remained in disagreement with him the whole time, okay? And so NASA says that this thing is basically coming out of nowhere, and it's never actually orbited here again. So, what I see here so far is a pattern. I see a 13,000 year repeated pole shift, and I see Leonid Elenin mentioning 13,000 years, and then I see NASA saying that it's an anomaly. It's just coming in out of nowhere. So keep that in mind because I want to show you something else. Now, wouldn't it be interesting if somebody actually knew that we were going to have some kind of a consciousness shift, but didn't want to let us know that something like that was going to be occurring? So,
Edgar Cayce's account, many other ancient prophecies, including Nostradamus and Mayan prophecies, have talked about polar shifts in one way or another. And modern science is becoming increasingly aware that there is going to be a polar shift in our near future, which is lining up with our consciousness shift, though they don't take that aspect into account.
Okay, so did you hear that? So somehow, for whatever reason, they don't take that part of it into account, the consciousness shift. So we've got Elenin on an elliptical orbit path of 13,000 years associated with the consciousness shift that we are not being told about, possibly.
It's funny, actually. A while back, NOVA did 2 reports on polar shifts, and both times NASA shut them down. Then...
Isn't that interesting? NASA tends to have they tend to shut things down quite abruptly sometimes, usually for budget reasons. If you can remember a while back when they had been touting the WISE telescope, surely the WISE telescope can, spot whatever if something's coming into the solar system. And if I remember, there were a couple of people that had announced that there was something coming into the solar system, and that it could have been some kind of gaseous planet or whatever. So as soon as they announced that, 3 days later, NASA shut down the WISE telescope because of budget reasons. Do you remember that?
It's almost as if a specific company doesn't want us knowing about this and the evidence that's been brought forth. Polar shifts are directly related to the magnetics of the planet as well. Planetary magnetics are supposed to look like this, but the reality is much different. Our magnetics have been weakening over the last 500 years or so.
Okay, so I'm going to pause right there, and then I'm going to show you the next video, which is going to put it all together for you. Okay, you'll remember this video. I'm going to play part of it for you, and it should hit you when you've got the puzzle figured out, but I'll stop it anyway.
Sent most of the lower dimensional beings back, at least as many as they could, and sealed up the dimensional tear. Despite this, the situation got really bad, really fast. All of the economic systems collapsed. Financial, social, and all concepts of how life ought to be completely broke down. Everyone on Atlantis began getting sick with weird diseases, and the entire continent went into a state of survival. Life was no longer about living. It became about surviving until tomorrow. It was a literal hell on Earth. The Nicals had no idea what to do. They were children compared to the events that had been thrust upon them. So, they prayed. They prayed to the highest levels of conscious life in the universe, asking for help from anyone who could hear them. The problem was reviewed on many high levels of life. Why I'm drawing is the Justice League, because the 11th and 12th dimensions are completely incomprehensible to us in our current state. What they told us was this: we were going to fall. We were going to hit rock bottom, level 1, the lowest place we possibly could be in the universe and still survive. Also, we were changing polarity. We were no longer a female species, so we were starting from square one as a male species. And finally, and this was the shocker, we would only have 13,000 years to return to Christ consciousness.
We would only have 13,000 years to return to Christ consciousness. So isn't that interesting? So that basically means that at the end of 13,000 years, 13,000 years ago, during the last pole shift, so that basically means that since Comet Elenin is on a 13,000 year orbit, and we had 13,000 years to raise ourselves to Christ consciousness, don't you think there might be a reason why they're trying to spread fear instead of trying to let us know what's really going on? And that is that we're about to shift into Christ consciousness, because they want to control our consciousness. That's why.